To Business 360, I'm Shireen Bhan. The headlines we're tracking for you this Friday evening. The Sensex and the Nifty snap a three-day losing streak, but still end the week 1% lower. Mid-caps outperform the blue chips this week. Real estate and PSU bank stocks are the big laggards. And that was the story on Dalal Street. SBI posts an operationally weak quarter. The decline in net interest margins is the highest in 6 years. Loan growth at 1% is the slowest in 7 quarters. Profit more than doubles on the back of rising non-interest income. 12% yearly growth in deposits is the best in 6 years. M&M beats estimates in Q1. Profits nearly double. Revenue jumps 23%. CEO Anish Shah assures investors that capital allocation policy remains unchanged after the 400 crore rupee RBL Bank investment that M&M made. Adds the group will not invest any more in the bank unless it sees a compelling strategic value. Relief for Congress leader Rahul Gandhi after the Supreme Court stays his conviction in the Modi surname defamation case. The court also puts on hold his disqualification as a member of parliament. The top court states disqualification not only affects Gandhi but also the electorate who have elected him. Apple's earnings meet subdued expectations even as revenue slump for the third straight quarter. The management says revenue may drop this quarter as well. However, India emerges as a bright spot with revenues at a record high. Amazon reports a strong Q2 with nearly $8 billion in operating profit. Revenue growth is in double digits. The company expects growth to accelerate next quarter as the cost-cutting efforts bear fruit. It's a setback for Oppo in the patent infringement case. The Supreme Court refuses to stay the High Court's order asking the Chinese smartphone maker to deposit 23% of India's sales towards royalty for alleged infringement of Nokia's patent. The apex court gives Oppo 3 weeks to make the payment. Haryana remains tense with reports of sporadic incidents of violence. One shop and vehicle vandalized in Panipat. More than 200 people arrested so far. Bulldozers razed 250 shanties in a town near Nu, where the violence began. Authorities claim the shanties were illegally built on government land. Former U.S. President Donald Trump pleads not guilty to charges that he tried to overturn the 2020 election loss. Trump is accused of promoting false claims that the election was rigged and assembling fake slates of electors to wrest electoral votes from Biden. Trump has called these charges a witch hunt. Well, let's start as always with the stock market action. The market's managing to snap a three-day losing streak. So the Sensex gained nearly 500 points today and the Nifty was higher by about 135 points. But for the week, if you take a look at both the indices, they were down by about 1%. Now, this is the second straight week of decline for the Nifty. Mid-caps, of course, have relatively outperformed the blue chips this week with gains of about 1%. That is the story in the Nifty Bank closing almost 1% higher this afternoon. Prashant is standing by now to take us through the market action for the day and the week. Prashant.
Well, for the last 2 days, the market had been selling off, and today, finally, we got a bit of a bounce. So, in the Nifty, it was a 350-point cut over Wednesday and Thursday, and today, it was a solid bounce. And it was widespread, the gains, not just in a particular pocket, and I think that was heartening. The Nifty up on your screen, the banks index doing pretty well. Actually, private banks, large cap financial stocks really led from the front. Mid caps and small caps also had a strong day. We pointed this out yesterday at close and this morning as well, that one indication that the market was not throwing in the towel was even on a day like yesterday, mid and small cap indices actually ended in the green. And there was follow through today. So sectorally, IT, as I said, private banks and pharma were the three areas where we saw maximum gains bunched up in. On large caps, there were names like Cipla, IndusInd Bank, Tech Mahindra, Wipro, Bharti Airtel, which did quite well. Cuts coming through in names like SBI, Bajaj and BPCL. Now, let's get to the broader market. Zomato, in a way, was the standout performer, turning profitable almost a year ahead of what they said they will. That stock saw solid gains on volumes, but it kind of lit a fire under some of these other names as well. Policy Bazaar, Delivery, Info Edge, these were some of the other names which were up and about. LIC Housing reacting to numbers, strong gains. Religare was another one from the financials pack. And then you had a beaten down leg like Jubilant Foodworks, which saw gains. KPIT Tech, JK Tyre, NBCC, HBL Power, Castrol, and so on and so forth. Losses coming through in Cummins India. MGL was down, largely earnings related. ABFRL, Nucleus, Radico saw some pullbacks as well. we said this, that in a strong market, and we've had a very strong market this year, bad news, the market looks through it. Well, we've had one day of looking through it. Can we hold on is the question. I think the immediate sort of destination is the 20-day moving average, which is about 100 points out for the Nifty and about 500 points out for the Bank Nifty.
Many thanks for joining us. Well, that was the market action for the day and the week. But let's talk about the big story. S&P Global expects the Indian economy to grow at an average annual rate of nearly 7% till 2031. Now, that's put India on the path to be the third largest economy by 2031, with an estimated GDP of $6.7 trillion. S&P further says that India's growth will be driven by manufacturing and services exports coupled with demand. However, the report highlights the need for India to capitalize on its demographic dividend by increasing labour force participation and upskilling. Veteran banker KV Kamath believes it's entirely feasible for India to double its GDP by 2031.
Growth momentum is clearly good. And I would think that there are 2-3 things that one needs to look at whether growth will happen or not. I think A is there demand for things that you need to do to grow? India's answer is absolutely yes. Do you have an aspiration to grow? Aspiration clearly is there, very clearly laid out by the center and the states. The third is, do you have the funding ability to grow?
Well, that is KV Kamath on the macros. The big earnings of the day. Let's start with State Bank of India reporting an operationally weak quarter. Net interest income slipped nearly 40 basis points, and that is the highest that we've seen in the last 6 years. Loan growth at 1% is also the slowest that we've seen in the last 7 quarters. However, the bank did record its highest ever quarterly PAT, that's profit after tax, supported by treasury gains. Abhishek is standing by now to take us through SBI's numbers. Abhishek, give us the report card.
Well, there was weakness in the net interest margin of SBI, which weighed on the performance. The performance on loan growth was also on the weaker side. So what doesn't work in the result is that the net interest margin over there, the domestic net interest margin has declined by 37 basis points, which is the highest decline on a sequential basis in last 6 years. The loan growth has come in at a mere 1% quarter on quarter, which is the weakest loan growth in last 7 quarters as well. Treasury gain of about 3,847 crore has actually aided the PAT this time around, and provision declined by about 43% YOY and around 24.5% sequentially has actually helped the PAT beat the poll. CASA ratio, or the low-cost deposit ratio, at 42.9% is perhaps the lowest in last 8 years or even more, and the watch list or the stress assets have actually increased by 127.65% on a sequential basis on a value-wise, which has not worked in the results. What has worked in the result is the fact that deposit growth on a YOY basis is at 12%, which is the best in last 9 quarters. The cost to income ratio, that's improved on a sequential basis thanks to treasury gains, and OPEX, that is operating expense, decline of more than 13% on a sequential basis. Quarterly PAT of about 16,884 crore is perhaps the highest quarterly PAT that SBI has ever reported. Back to you.
Okay, that stock closing about 3% lower. That's State Bank of India for you. Abhishek, many thanks for joining us. From one big earnings to the next, Mahindra & Mahindra posting a strong first quarter ahead of street expectations on all fronts. The company's net profit nearly doubled, while revenues jumped 23% compared to last year. This on the back of strong performance from its auto, farm and services verticals. The company's management has said M&M will not invest any more in RBL Bank unless they see a compelling strategic value in the same. Take a look.
This investment is really for us to understand banking in a lot more detail with a very long-term view. This is a 7 to 10-year view. There are no assumptions on our part today whether we want to get into a bank or not. In fact, at this point in time, we cannot and we do not want to. There is no intention of going further beyond this at this point. At this stage, we do not expect to go higher. At some point in future, if there's a very compelling strategic reason, which we will have to understand in detail, evaluate in detail, in line with our capital allocation guidelines, we will look at it at that point in time.
Well, that's Mahindra & Mahindra's Anish Shah saying that this is not a strategic investment at this point in time. It may perhaps end up being one, but that's a 7 to 10-year timeline that they are considering. So nothing more on the anvil. But in global earnings, tech giant Apple reporting its third quarter numbers, meeting subdued expectations. With this, Apple's revenues have declined now for 3 straight quarters. However, India seems to be emerging as the bright spot. Hormuz standing by now to take us through the details. Hormuz, so challenging times there for Apple, but India clearly stands out.
Well, yes, it does. Tim Cook has been pretty bullish on India, and he mentioned this when he was here during the opening of the stores as well. So let's take a look at what Apple mentioned about India during their earnings call. And India finds them mentioned about 9 times in their earnings call transcript. And they began by saying that the revenues from the India operations were at a record high. And we must keep in mind that the stores in Bombay and in Delhi were opened towards the later half of April. So there was still a little headroom, and despite that, there were record high revenues from the stores. And Tim Cook also mentioned that the performance of both of these stores has been higher than what was Apple's initial expectations. Now, they also mentioned that they are investing significantly in building their direct-to-consumer channels. But the highlight of the earnings call was Tim Cook's commentary on the growth runway that India has. And he said that there is a significant opportunity for growth simply because India is the world's second largest smartphone market, and Apple still has a very minuscule share. So there is a significant headroom for growth that Apple has in India. Now, coming to the numbers, well, it was a fairly dull quarter for Apple. Revenues were down 1%. The iPhone revenue, which is their biggest business, that was down 2%. The iPad revenue was down 20%. And the management is saying that the September quarter is going to be no different, and revenues may decline there as well. So if that happens, that will be the 4th straight revenue decline for Apple, which will be their worst streak in 20 years. And rightly so, the stock was down in after-hours trading when the numbers were announced, and it's down in pre-market trading as well. So all in all, a forgettable quarter for Apple, but India is certainly the apple of their eye.
Yes, it looks that way, doesn't it, Hormuz? Given the market share that Apple currently enjoys and the potential for future growth. Hormuz, many thanks for joining us. Let's stay with global earnings. Amazon reported a strong quarter, beating street estimates across all fronts. The company has issued a positive guidance projecting accelerating revenue growth. Amazon reporting a jump in revenue of over $134 billion, making it the tech giant's biggest earnings beat since the 4th quarter of 2020. Now, back home, the government on Thursday restricted the imports of laptops, tablets, personal computers and made it mandatory for importers to own a license to import any of these items. Government sources tell CNBC-TV18 this move is aimed at boosting domestic production and attracting foreign companies to assemble and manufacture in India. Abhimanyu standing by now with the details. Abhimanyu, what is the basis for this decision? How does the government explain this, and what do they anticipate now with these curbs coming in?
Explaining the rationale behind the government's decision to curb the import of laptops and PCs, government sources have indicated that the intent is to promote Make in India, domestic production, as well as attract more investment for production within the Indian territory. Also, government sources assured that this is not going to lead to any rise in prices of PCs and laptops, stating that there is excess domestic capacity available in India. Also, government sources dismissed any concerns about the possibility of this move being violative of India's commitments at the WTO, stating that being a signatory to the ITA does not mean that India cannot pass such an order, since the importers who still want to import laptops and PCs can take a license to go ahead and keep importing the laptops. Also, it has been stated by the government sources that the decision is also aimed to check the rising trade imbalance with China, and this move is aimed at ensuring that India's trade balance goes in the right direction. The government is also aiming that, like iPhone, it wants a competitive advantage in laptops and PCs by using India's strength in the assembly segment of the value chain. So clearly the government is defending its decision and is saying that there is going to be no price increase in the short term, and in the medium to long term there is going to be a big advantage for India as far as this order is concerned.
Abhi, many thanks for joining us. It is time for us to head to a break, but up next, relief for Congress leader Rahul Gandhi. This after the Supreme Court stays his conviction in the defamation case. That and more when we return. The Supreme Court has stayed the conviction of Congress leader Rahul Gandhi in the Modi surname defamation case. The Surat trial court had sentenced Gandhi to 2 years of prison earlier this year. This led to his disqualification as a Lok Sabha MP. The Gujarat High Court had upheld the conviction. The Supreme Court has said that while it did not wish to comment on the merits of the case, it expected the trial court to give reasons for imposing the maximum sentence of 2 years, which triggered Gandhi's disqualification. The court also observed that Gandhi should have exercised a degree of caution while making speeches. The court's verdict today could restore Gandhi's status as a member of parliament and allow him to contest the 2024 general election. Well, joining us now is Pallavi Ghosh. She's at the AICC headquarters. Pallavi, many thanks for joining us. Relief coming in there from Rahul Gandhi, from the Supreme Court. But the question now is, when will we see him return to Parliament?
Well, there's a procedure which is really involved over here. The procedure is very simple. Once the court order reaches the Speaker's office and the application is already there on behalf of Rahul Gandhi, then the Speaker decides on the date and time for the reinstatement of Rahul Gandhi. What the Congress party is certainly hoping for is that it happens as soon as possible. As we all know, the no confidence motion is taking place from 8th to 10th. So in an ideal situation, if the Congress has its way, it would want Rahul Gandhi to be very much a part of the no confidence motion and also to speak up on behalf of the Congress party against the government and against the Prime Minister. So Monday is the timeline which the Congress party is pretty hopeful of, that Rahul Gandhi should be able to enter Parliament once again.
राहुल गांधी जी ये सत्य का प्रतीक है। राहुल गांधी जी की ये जीत सत्य की जीत है और ये राहुल गांधी जी अगले तारीख ये साजिश के खिलाफ और ये सत्तारूढ़ पार्टी के खिलाफ आंधी बनकर उतरेंगे और हिंदुस्तान में एक नया दिशा दिखाते हुए ये सरकार को सत्ता से हटाने की हर संभव पहल शुरू किए जाएंगे।
सच्चाई की वो गूंज जिसकी सबसे ज्यादा आवश्यकता है, सच्चाई की वो आवाज, निर्भीक निडर वो आवाज श्री राहुल गांधी की फिर सुनाई देगी, सरकार को जवाबदेह बनाते हुए और प्रजातंत्र की रक्षा करते हुए।
जो भी नामदार सुप्रीम कोर्ट का आज फैसला आया है, उसको सम्मान के साथ हम उसको स्वागत करते हैं, सम्मान के साथ स्वीकार करते हैं।
सर, नाम बदलने की बात भी कर रहे हैं उसमें?
नाम नहीं, तो सरनेम तो आप अगर कोई अभी माइक का काम करते हो तो आपका भी सरनेम अलग अलग हो सकता है। इट्स नॉट इम्पोर्टेंट।
Well, relief coming in there for Rahul Gandhi. There is, of course, still clarity awaited on his return to Parliament. The situation in Haryana remains tense days after the communal clashes in the Nuh district, which triggered a flare-up in other parts of the state, leading to the death of 6 people. Now, the state continues to see heavy police deployment across several districts. Over 200 people have been arrested so far. A few isolated incidents of arson were reported as well. The state government reportedly had bulldozers razed 250 shanties in a town near Nuh, where the violence began. Authorities claim the shanties were illegally built on government land. As of now, more than 200 people have been arrested in relation to the violence. However, in the midst of reports of violence and arson, a village in Gurugram is standing apart as a beacon of communal harmony. Shivani Bazaz with the story.
Almost 30 kilometers ahead of Badshapur in Gurugram is Gandhigram of village Ghaseda. Right in the middle of Nuh and Badshapur that were rocked by communal tension and arson in the last couple of days. A Muslim-dominated village with around 150 Hindu families. In the last 1 week since the communal tension broke out in the area, the Muslims of the village along with their Hindu neighbors are guarding the only temple in the village.
हमारे 10-12 आदमी हमारे रहते हैं और 4 या 5 लोग हमारे जो ये हिंदू भाई हैं ये रहते हैं और अपने मंदिर की हिफाजत कर रहे हैं हम, ताकि कोई बाहर के तत्व आके कोई ऐसा फितना फसाद ना करे, तोड़ फोड़ ना करे।
और ये करने की जरूरत क्यों पड़ गई आपको? आप यहाँ इतने सालों से रह रहे हैं, यहाँ एक मंदिर है, यहाँ पे मैंने पीछे देखा एक मस्जिद भी है। ये जो नूह में अभी हिंसा हुई है उसके चलते ये ज्यादा आप जो सिक्योरिटी कर रहे हैं?
जी हाँ, फिलहाल तो हम उसी के चलते कर रहे हैं, क्योंकि बाहर के जो लोग आते हैं वहाँ भड़काते हैं। हमारा भाईचारा बहुत अच्छा है यहाँ पे, इसलिए
बहुत से लोग तो गांव छोड़ के ही चले गए हैं, यानी कि डर की वजह से। लेकिन मैं तो फिलहाल नहीं गया हूँ क्योंकि गांव में बहुत डर का माहौल है, रात को काफी देर तक लोग जागते हैं।
In the darkness, we all need a ray of hope. Gandhigram of village Ghaseda is the story of such hope in the darkness of violence and fear that has engulfed the adjoining areas of Nu, Sona and Badshapur in Haryana. The communal harmony and friendships of this village have stood the test of time, and the villagers here believe that this tough time will pass soon. In Haryana's Nu district, with Vijay Rajinder Raina, this is Shivani Bajaj for CNBC-TV18.
Well, on that note, it is time for us to take a break here on this edition of Business 360. Thanks very much for watching. Do stay tuned. The news will continue here on CNBC-TV18.